Roll for Crit is made possible thanks to the support of viewers like you and our patrons on our Patreon page.
You can become a patron for just $1 a month at patreon.com/rollforcrit.
It's Kickstarter time, and boy, do we have some big ones for you. Let's see what Kickstarters we picked out for the week of October 19th, 2020.
Darkest Dungeon is a roguelike dungeon crawling video game that is now being turned into a roguelike dungeon crawling board game from Mythic Games. This is a co-op game for 1 to 4 players. You will team up, choose an adventurer, and explore a randomly generated dungeon. As you go, of course, you'll be finding loot and getting experience points so that you can gain new skills for your character and make them stronger as things go on. And in between sessions, you'll be playing this game over a campaign with multiple scenarios. You will be able to go back and upgrade your town, your central hub that you get to go to, and you can also go there to try to recover your health or perhaps get rid of negative quirks that you may gain that will have effects on how you play, or to lower your stress levels. If you take too much stress or you take too much damage or get too many negative quirks, your character will die and you'll have to start with a new one. Combat in this game is, of course, a big part of it. You're going to be finding plenty of monsters to fight as you go, using your different skills, and you'll be able to take different stances on your turn. You can change stances, and depending on your character and depending on what your skills are, some of them might require you to be in different stances as you are moving around the room and searching for loot and trying to take on these monsters and survive in order to proceed to the next area. Darkest Dungeon is not a video game I have personal experience with, but it's one of those ones that I've heard a lot about and has always been in the back of my mind as like, I should try that one of these days. People say it's good. It's supposed to be pretty punishing. I do like roguelike games in general, and I like the idea of translating that in this way to a board game format. This one does include permadeath, so if your character dies, you have to get a new one, and if you run out of extra characters to choose from, you got to start the whole campaign over from scratch. You're out. So you have to be very careful. And of course, this is from Mythic Games, so there are also lots and lots of minis.
I find it very interesting, the general evolution of seeing these video games come to the board game space, and how I feel like sometimes it's just like, look, let's just bring over this character model. You remember this character. When sometimes they're like, how can we get that feeling of, for example, like you said, the roguelite, and bring it into the tabletop area. It's also funny, like in particular with some of these, like this one, it's sort of almost like there was Dungeons and Dragons and we made them video games of this kind of stuff. And now it's back to the table.
Right,
it's
yes.
A circle of nerds.
Things really go full circle. Yeah, one thing influences another thing, influences another thing. It's very convoluted. There's a lot of layers to it. But whether you're a fan of the original Darkest Dungeon or not, you can take a look at this Kickstarter and see what you think. If you like co-op dungeon crawling adventures and the idea of that potential permadeath thing happening to you, you can jump in on this one for $100, including all those minis, or you spend even more money to get more expansions and things added on.
Freedom 5, a Sentinel Comics board game, is, a board game based on the Sentinels universe that originated in the Sentinels of the Multiverse card game a while back. However, that world, so to speak, ended with their Oblivion cycle, and now we're seeing these characters reborn in a board game format. In the game, you will take in the role of one of these heroes, 5 in the core, but if you've played any of the previous games, you know there are so many more heroes to play with. And you will try to stop the evil schemes of the head villain, while also trying to deal with other henchmen all around the city. Henchmen will come in different colors and they'll spawn in different places. You will have to deal with them, and not only deal with them as superheroes, but you will also have a private life card. So very similar to Marvel Champions, you have a card that can flip back and forth. Each character, of course, is unique with their own cards and dealing with enemies and what number of dice and different abilities they can pull off. But you'll have to be careful if you're not able to do too much. One, if you end as a hero, they're going to fight you that turn. They don't go after the private citizens just yet. And, of course, the big bad is going to be doing his own thing. He has a scheme deck, which, of course, has only negative stuff in there, including spawning henchmen. And when henchmen spawn, if there are already too many henchmen in that area, this set will sound very familiar. they will go onto the Big Bad's board, and then they'll spawn in every connected area. Of course, there are cards you can shuffle into that deck, like to be Justice is Nigh or Justice is in the Night, which gives you sort of a day to reprieve before you deal with too many more minions. This is also, by the way, a campaign game. You can choose to play scenarios standalone, but there is a way for you to go through the story and find out what's been going on in the city and what is the true evil behind all of this. I like this world. I think these are a really fun take on superheroes. I mean, there are many of them that are very recognizable in terms of like, oh, I've seen something like this before. But this does still feel like, to me, the kind of groups of heroes almost like a Marvel or DC. It doesn't just feel like a quick parody of them anymore because they put so much work in the card game version. So I'm happy to see them still doing this and taking advantage of this property.
Yeah, it's a cool property. They have some really cool characters. It's fun to see them pop up here. And like you mentioned, I really enjoyed that alter ego mechanic from Marvel Champions. I think that's a fun idea to explore in a superhero setting. This is an Arcane Wonders Dice Tower essential. So, like, right off the bat, you got to sit up and take notice. And I haven't played Defenders of the Realm, which this uses that system. But according to the Kickstarter page, this is the pinnacle of the Defenders of the Realm system. That's what they say. So it must be pretty great if that's the case.
I am curious how much the campaign is going to link with each other because they did say you can play them solo. I know in the card game, for example, playing certain heroes and villains because they were arch nemesi. Is that what you'd say? Nemesis? Anyways, that they would interact with each other more because of that. So I'm curious in the storyline, it would be like someone needs to play this hero or they get special bonuses if you have this hero on the table because it makes sense that that person would be involved in this storyline. Stuff like that. And also, like I said, odds are this game is going to grow because they already have a huge cast of both heroes and villains to play against. If you're looking for just a copy of the game or, just the bare bones basics, that's $49. But of course, there's a Kickstarter exclusive starting at $99, which comes with a bunch of other crazy stuff. And if you want, you can throw on pre-painted miniatures, which is pretty nice if you're sick of just seeing all your heroes in gray.
The next game that you can get is Don't Get Got Secret Missions from Big Potato Games and Shut Up and Sit Down. The original Don't Get Got was just from Big Potato Games as a party game, and they reached out to Shut Up and Sit Down to design their own cards for this new expansion. But if you back it, it also includes everything from the original game, so this is kind of like an ultimate box set. The way the game works is it's sort of meant to be paired with a separate gathering as opposed to being a game in its own right. Each player has a little plastic wallet that you slip these little mini cards inside of, and those cards will have different missions that you need to try to carry out, and those are things that you need to get other players to try to do. If you manage to get them to do it, then you get to switch the card to its completed side and you feel good about yourself. However, if someone calls you out and they think that you're acting weird and they think you're trying to get them to do something, and if they're right, then you have to flip it to its failed side and you were not able to complete that mission. Some of the examples from the original game are things like trying to hide a card in a player's pocket or like getting them to say a certain phrase or do a certain thing. They didn't show any examples from the new set on this Kickstarter page, at least that I could find, because they want to keep them a surprise. They don't want you to know any of them in advance because that would kind of ruin some of the purpose of the game. But this, I haven't played the original Don't Get Got, but there is another game called Pretense from Button Shy Games, which was a similar concept where everyone had a secret goal, but it was much smaller and it was more, I think, specifically geared towards game nights. Was related to things around board games, whereas this could really be played in any kind of a scenario. It's a very funny idea, and like I said, it comes with everything from the original, so if you missed out on that, you can get this one. But with more of that, of course, the humor from Shut Up and Sit Down.
My guess is that this expansion, it will be sort of like you said with Pretense, more board game related. related things, or
Maybe some of them.
maybe some inside jokes from their series.
Hopefully, I think most of them will probably be, relatively universal, because they do want to be, I assume, sell this later on to your mass market kind of crowds. But there are some already a bunch of stretch goals they've hit with like even more cards and more expansions. There's like over 200 weird little things that you can attempt to do. The set goes for about $26 US right now on Kickstarter, and you can check it out. It's called Don't Get Got.
Now, in the before times, many of us enjoyed going on cruise ships, but sometimes dark and evil things can happen on there, and that's what the Midnight Murder Mysteries is all about. In this game, there has been a murder on this cruise ship. Indeed. And it is up to you to solve the case before anyone else. This is a competitive mystery solving game in which you are competing with everyone to try to solve the mystery before the yacht returns in at port. Now, to do so, you're going to have to interview suspects, find evidence, but along the way, you're going to make decisions whether you want to try to do it publicly or privately. Publicly means everyone's going to know about it, but it costs less actions than to do it privately. So you're going to have to decide how to manage your resources and whether you think this is something that's going to be really big and help other people much, or is it not going to help them too much without the evidence I already know privately. We're seeing a lot of growth in the mystery game genre, and I will not complain on that. It's one of my favorite game styles, but I think competitive is still it's something that I don't think we've mastered too much yet.
There's more co-op ones for sure, yeah. But I mean, I think Detective was the big one, the first one that you enjoyed, that made you like competitive.
And I think this take notes from that. I think the deciding public versus private is where you get things a bit more. I guess technically Clue is, but
yeah, that's the OG.
That is the OG. And I like that private and public deciding thing, because then you have to decide how much you know and how much you think this is going to help other people. So I think that adds a bit more of a balance and not just a race.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm like you.
Knowledge.
I'm on board with the murder mysteries. I think that's always fun. That Clue-esque, but with actually better gameplay underneath it. And I saw that this was originally out of France, and
Indeed,
you know what?
Yeah.
I trust France. I think they make good board games, so I'm on board.
This was, I think, funded there already or something. I wasn't exactly sure, but they're bringing it over here in English as well as I think Spanish. And the way it works is there's a whole bunch of cases. I think there's different books. I think the core will come with a red and green book. There's also a purple book, and I can't remember the last color, but they're up to 25 cases, so there's plenty of mysteries for you to solve. And if you're unsure about this, they actually have a few print and play versions of 3 cases, like mini cases, so you can see how you feel about the game mechanics and mystery and if that's up your alley. Now, the core base is just around $52, but if you want to go all in and get all the cases, that's going to be around $64.
My next pick is kind of a weird one. It's called MODRULES. It is a set of expansion packs for games not made by the people who are making this expansion pack. They're sort of like homebrew mods for classic games. And they have plans for a bunch in the works, but they have 3 in particular this Kickstarter is funding that you will be able to apply to Monopoly, Candyland, and Texas Hold'em Poker. So depending on which one you buy, you will, use them in each game, and they will put a different twist on it. You'll throw these cards in, and they add new life to them. So for example, in Monopoly, there's a card that lets you break out of jail, or there's a helicopter you can use to move faster, or even turn railroads into teleporters so you can teleport around the board. While in Candyland, you now have candy-themed weapons, and you have an option to fight each other and use those weapons to try to take the other opponent down. And then in poker, there's things like you can steal cards from each other, look at each other's hands, or like change suits to a different suit type if you have a card. So things that will, make these games that you've probably played 100 times, maybe never want to play again, and turn them on their head, modernize them a little bit. I don't know how well these are going to work, to be honest with you. I think there's some risk of them just being maybe too goofy, and maybe at the end of the day, like maybe Monopoly is just not worth saving. Maybe we don't need to play Candyland with extra stuff. We should just play a new game. But there is something about it, the idea in general, that I really, really like. It reminds me of, way like back in the 80s, they would put out mod packs. I was watching this documentary on Netflix about video games, and these dudes would make mods for arcade games to make them harder unofficially and like sell them to arcades and be like, look, now Pac-Man's harder and people have to put more quarters in. And there's something fun about that, of people taking their own rules, like house rules or variants that you might read fan made on Board Game Geek or whatever, but in a nice, neat package, something that maybe if you have a family member who doesn't want to play a newer game, but for some reason they love Monopoly, you can give them this like as something for a little present for Christmas or whatever, a little stocking stuffer. Like, look, now Monopoly's maybe a little more fun if you try this.
I have a feeling that kind of family member would be like, "No, I like it the way it is."
No. They'll like
That
it.
said, I do think Monopoly's I'd love to see more cases of trying to change Monopoly. I think there are things to do, the idea behind it and not make it nearly as draining. I don't know. There's something behind it. Like Candyland, I don't think I never looked at Candyland like this needed combat.
Candyland's a weird one to me because I'm like, who's playing that who's not 7?
Right. I mean, this isn't new. I remember cards adjust humidity.
Crabs adjust
Crabs, not
humidity.
cards, wow.
That's right. Yeah.
But,
it has been done.
I do think there are some interesting, because there are plenty of times I think a house rule is fine. I know for us, like this is just a quick example from Mansions of Madness. You're not supposed to share puzzles, but we house rule is if you're in the same spot, the idea is your character's just looking over the other person's shoulder. And I think that adds some more like interaction, at least, so the players aren't just sitting there waiting while the person's clicking on the puzzle. You know? And it's thematic. So I'm all for this. I think it's a good experimentation.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea too. They said like Catan is one of the ones in the future in the works, so we'll see how far they get with it. You can get a digital version of one of these for $8 or the physical pack for $16, and I think they're pretty much ready to go. So as soon as the campaign ends, you'll be able to download them. So check it out. It's called MODRULES.
We're going to end on Dragon Gaius from Arc-like Games. This is a head-to-head miniature combat game where one side will play as the Royal Order humans as well as their giant mech, trying to fend off the Dranics, pretty much dragons and wyverns and drake creatures that are trying to kill off the Order. I picked this because I thought, one, I love the art style. It was very, at least to me, Final Fantasy reminiscent. But also, reading some of the rules, I like the idea is, one, it's not simply just like chess where you set up on each side of the board. You actually choose different startup scenarios. So that could favor one side or the other or change up the gameplay. And this is, by the way, like chess, where you do have one really strong unit, but if that unit dies, your king, that's how you end the game. But there's also rules variants for, obviously, team battles of 3 to 4, but also solo play, where you play as the Order and the Draconic people are going to be controlled by an AI. I thought that was really cool. I think the minis look really great. So I thought it was a cool idea of a game to at least take a look at, especially if you're into that sort of mini combat style. In particular, because also it seems to have set up teams so you don't need to spend hours building your team beforehand.
Yeah, this definitely is the kind of game that, to me, at least at first glance, doesn't appeal to me that much. It seems very much like a you thing, but I don't know. Maybe they could do something fun with it.
Look, I admit there's plenty of times when I kick a Kickstarter like this, I'm like, it's got some of the aesthetics maybe I'll like, but the rest are probably boring. But I felt it had enough interesting stuff there that if you like this kind, like miniatures and enjoy that, this is something at least for you to look at. Like, I think there's enough there to make it stand out from the rest. That said, this is a heavy, big miniatures game with a lot of cool stuff, but it will hurt your wallet a little bit. It starts at $157 about. So do take a look and see if you want this before buying.
There is another Kickstarter that launched just the other day called Here Be Dragons Into the Unknown. It's an exploration monster combat game in a fantasy setting. We did a full preview for that one, so if you want to learn more about the rules, how it plays, and see what you think about it, look elsewhere on our channel. And as always, we want you to tell us in the comments which Kickstarters from this set are you backing?
Yes, there are a lot of Kickstarters and obviously some very big ones this week, but there's always more that maybe we didn't discover or just came out as soon as we released this video. That tends to happen a lot. You can let us know in those comments right down below.
Yep, until then, I'm Jonathan.
I'm Will.
This was Roll for Crits, Kickstarter, Pickstarter.
If you want to help out, you can check out our Patreon, or a simple click to like and subscribe can go a long way.
We really appreciate everything that you can do for us. We love you.